Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport and part 2 of our look at every New Zealand Grand Prix winner ever. All 50 of them. 50 men who have won the New Zealand Grand Prix. Why did I say I'd do all this in a week? I might as well translate the entire Bible into Klingon. So in part 1 we looked at every winner from 1950 to 1975. Now we are going to look at the next batch of serial winners and keep an eye on the drivers taking part. It fluctuates in quality from here on out. We are going to have some Formula 1 drivers winning the New Zealand Grand Prix and a Formula 1 champion to boot. But there is definitely a dip in quality. From the likes of Stirling Moss, Jack Brabham, Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart, Chris Amon and their ilk. But really that's like Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz Jr., Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso turning up in Formula Regional. It's insane to think about and times change. We can't always have nice things. So make sure you watch part 1, subscribe so you don't miss part 3 and let's jump into the video. 1976, 1990 and 2004, Ken Smith. We start part 2 with a man who has taken part in 50 New Zealand Grand Prix. Quite a feat on its own, but he has also won the race 3 times in 3 very different eras. I won't go through all 50 New Zealand Grand Prix Ken Smith has taken part in. We'd have to go from the mid-60s to the 2020s. But his first of the 3 wins was in a Lola Chevrolet, and the last race won under Formula 5000 rules. His second in 1990 was in a Swift Cosworth Formula Pacific, and his last in 2004 was in a Van Diemen Formula Ford. He took part in his final New Zealand Grand Prix, at least I think it'll be his final Grand Prix, in 2021 at the age of 80, which is really damn impressive. You rock, old man. 1977 and 1978 Keke Rosberg. The 1982 Formula 1 champion was just making his Formula 1 debut in 1978 with Theodore Racing when he won the second of his New Zealand Grand Prix. Keke Rosberg won both races in a Chevron ahead of American Tom Gloy in 1977 and Larry Perkins and Danny Sullivan in 1978. He'd have a successful Formula 1 career with 5 wins and a title for Williams, and got to see his son Nico Rosberg take the Formula 1 crown in 2016, 34 years after Keke did the deed. Nico never won the New Zealand Grand Prix though. Maybe he should come out of retirement and give it a go. 1979 Tio Fabi. Italian Tio Fabi took the win for March ahead of Larry Perkins, who finished second once again. He was a March driver at the time in the European Formula 2 Championship, finishing third in 1980. He made his Formula 1 debut in 1982 for Tolman and took a couple of podiums for Brabham and Benetton, but spent most of his time jumping between the kart series and Formula 1, not committing to either. He was a race winner in kart, finishing runner-up in 1983 and starting the Indy 500 on pole. He also took a couple of podiums at Le Mans, winning the World Sports Car Championship in 1991. 1980 Steve Millan. After 30 years of the New Zealand Grand Prix, Steve Millan was only the 5th New Zealander to actually win it. Steve Millan started a run of 9 wins for Waltz, beating fellow Kiwi Dave McMillan and Formula 1 ace Andrea De Cesaris, who would be debuting in the big leagues with Alfa Romeo later that year. Steve Millan would move to America and race in a fair few major races, taking a class win at Le Mans in a Nissan 300ZX, as well as the IMSA GT Series. He won a class championship and the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1993, also in a Nissan, and raced in the IROC Series. He holds the record for most GTS wins in the IMSA, and also got work as an actor in commercials and as a stuntman. 1981 David McMillan. Up to this point, David McMillan had taken pole position and podiums in the New Zealand Grand Prix. Now he was finally winning it. The field was almost entirely made up of Australians and New Zealanders, with a single British entry for Reynard founder Adrian Reynard. David McMillan would follow his success in New Zealand by racing in America, finding some success in Formula Atlantic. 1982 Roberto Moreno. The popular Brazilian was a star in Australia and New Zealand before he became a Formula 1 driver. He won the Prix F1 Australian Grand Prix 3 times, often beating experienced Formula 1 talent in the process. He also won the New Zealand Grand Prix in 1982. For the first time it was run over 2 heats, and Roberto Moreno swapped a first and a second with Steve Millan, beating him on time by over 5 seconds. This same year, Moreno would have his ill-fated drive with Lotus, which did untold damage to his career, before eventually making a number of appearances in Formula 1 with a host of backmarker teams and Benetton, taking wins in the kart series as late as 2000. Moreno remains one of the most popular race drivers ever. 1983, David Oxton. After a decade of competing in the New Zealand Grand Prix, David Oxton finally won it in 1983. There were a few Formula 1 drivers in the field, not really top tier guys. Alan Berg and Christian Danner didn't make the biggest splash in Formula 1. Paul Rettich was also in the field and finished second to Oxton, with Dave McMillan third. This was towards the end of Oxton's racing career, and outside of some appearances in touring cars, he didn't do a lot of note after winning the New Zealand Grand Prix. 1984 and 1987, Davy Jones. This kind of started a run of success for American drivers in the New Zealand Grand Prix. Davy Jones pulled 2 wins from his locker. The first in 1984 was ahead of a very small field, mostly made up of former winners like Ken Smith and David Oxton, who completed the podium, as well as David McMillan. Only 11 cars took part in 1987, Davy Jones winning ahead of Mike Fackwell and Ken Smith again. Jones has had a long, successful career. Considered for Formula 1 by Brabham in the mid-80s, he went on to make appearances in the kart series and won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1999 alongside Manuel Reuter and Alexander Wurz for Jost Porsche. He also finished second in the Indy 500 in 1996. He was still racing in sports cars in the mid-2000s. 1985 and 1986, Ross Chever. The younger brother of Formula 1 driver and Indy 500 winner Eddie Chever, Ross never managed to live up to his brother's successes, but he did find his own success, mostly in Japan. He also won 2 New Zealand Grand Prix. Both races had very small fields. Only 7 drivers finished in 1985 and 9 in 1986. Ross Chever would win the Japanese Formula 3 in 1987 and stay in Japan for the next 7 years, finishing runner-up twice and third 3 times in a row between 1992 and 1994. He raced in America as well with a lot less success. 1988, Paul Radisich. British touring car legend Paul Radisich attempted the New Zealand Grand Prix a fair few times before finally winning it in 1988. Unfortunately, the results for the next few years seem to have been lost to time. He switched to touring cars in the 90s, never actually winning the British Touring Car Championship, but he did win the short-lived Touring Car World Cup twice and would go back to Australia to race in the V8 Supercars, retiring in the mid-2000s. 1989, Dean Hall. The last time an American won the New Zealand Grand Prix was Dean Hall in 1989. He was not the most impressive driver on the list, mostly having success in Australia in Formula Pacific. He raced in the kart series in 1990 but didn't do great, as well as part series in 1991 and 1995. He also raced in the IMSA until the late 90s. 1991, 1992 and 1993, Craig Baird. If New Zealand was the only country on earth, Craig Baird would be the greatest race driver in the world. His 3 wins in the New Zealand Grand Prix are just the tip of the iceberg of championships he's won in New Zealand, such as Formula Pacific, Touring Cars, Porsches, V8s, all multiple times. He also won a lot in Australia, but not in Britain. His one season in the British Touring Cars was shockingly poor. 1994, Greg Murphy. The enigma that is Greg Murphy won the New Zealand Grand Prix in 1994. Whilst he had a lot of success in New Zealand and Australia, he rarely ventured to other countries outside the odd GT appearance. He is most well known for his time in the Australian V8 series, where he was a regular race winner but never champion, finishing runner-up in 2003 and 2004. He did win the Bathurst 1000 4 times and the Bathurst 24 Hours with Peter Brock, Todd Kelly and Jason Bright. He has done some touring car racing in the years since, even winning championships in New Zealand in 2014 and 2015. 1995, Brady Kette. After breaking his legs in a Formula Ford race in 1993, it must have been a dream come true for Brady Kette when he won the New Zealand Grand Prix in 1995. Unfortunately, he never really progressed past national racing, returning to New Zealand Formula Ford by the late 90s and taking up truck racing shortly after. 1998 and 1999, Simon Wills. After a couple of years off, the New Zealand Grand Prix was won by Simon Wills to see out the 90s. The 1999 race was notable for having a couple of famous drivers in the field, namely 6-time IndyCar champion Scott Dixon and future V8 Supercars champion Craig Lowndes. Simon Wills would go on to have a pretty average career in touring cars, winning the second tier V8 title in 2001 and then spending a few years as a backmarker in the top series. He was done with motorsport by the mid-2000s. 2000, Andy Boof. The final driver we will look at today is Andy Boof, the final winner in a Formula Holden and the first of a new millennium. It was also the first time the series had returned to Pukekohe since 1991 and the final time the New Zealand Grand Prix would take place there to date. Andy Boof beat Matt Halliday and Paul Dumbrell and would later have touring car success in New Zealand, but nothing more. So there were 16 more winners of the New Zealand Grand Prix. Subscribe so you don't miss part 3, where we will cover the Formula Ford, Toyota Racing Series and Formula Regional Oceania eras, the final 18 drivers. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching and have a good one.